Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains and WebStorm. I'm Paul Everett, JetBrains Developer Advocate, and I'll be your host. The topic for today's webinar is getting started with Svelte in WebStorm. First, I'm really excited about this one. It's been fun prepping for it, but also 15 seconds into the webinar, I've already misspoken. The truth is this topic isn't just about WebStorm. This plugin is for all IntelliJ IDEs. But we're WebStorm, we're proud of it, so we're going to be showing it to you. Today, I'm joined by Tomasz and Andre from the WebStorm team. Welcome, Tomasz. You're the key presenter today. You're the star of the show. Can you give us a quick introduction about yourself?
Yes, thank you, Paul. So my name is Tomasz Błachut. I'm the newest member of WebStorm team, and but you may know me better as the creator of Svelte plugin for WebStorm. I started the project like 2 years ago, and joined recently, JetBrains. Previously, I was working as a front-end developer, so I know bits and I know the ropes how this industry works from user perspective.
Tomasz, Svelte is something, I mean, it intrigues me. I've watched all the stuff happening from the beginning. Not just because I might use it, because it feels like an example, I guess, of something important that's happening and changing in JavaScript front ends. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so Svelte is probably newest kid on the block, another framework you may say, but it has a really interesting concepts. It is a compiler, which is quite different than older approaches. And also is exploring in the newest area of next-gen bundlers, things like that with SvelteKit. So it's a really interesting thing to watch for.
You know, you just said SvelteKit, and 1 minute before we started, I replied to somebody, Fernando, who asked about SvelteKit. So clearly all these things are really on everybody's mind. Andre, you're going to help guide us through some of the important parts of this topic. Plus, it's always fun hanging around with you. Can you give a quick introduction?
Yes, hello Paul, hi Tomasz, hi everyone. My name is Andrei Starvoit. I am WebStorm team lead. Also, I developed some part of JavaScript and TypeScript support in WebStorm, and also I'm maintaining a lot of plugins for IntelliJ and WebStorm too.
You're the team lead for WebStorm, and you got a better microphone than I do, and I'm an advocate. I'm supposed to have the best microphone in the webinar, so I got to work on this. So great, we have a lot to cover. Onward. Okay, we'd like to make this webinar as conversational and live as possible, especially for this one. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. If you have any questions or any problems during the webinar, please feel free to ask them at any time during the presentation using the chat in YouTube. We'll have a few pauses during the webinar where Tomasz will answer your questions. The WebStorm team will be answering questions, probably already answering questions right there in the YouTube chat. Please don't wait till the end of the talk. Ask your questions as soon as you have them. Little tip, I'm looking over here instead of looking here because just 3 minutes before we started, I moved my laptop. My Thunderbolt cable came disconnected. So I'm not touching it now. I'm just going to look over here. Usually the first question is this webinar being recorded? We are currently recording. The recording will be available in the YouTube channel basically immediately. I always joke, someone always asks the question, is this being recorded? After I put this slide up. So in 3 minutes, look in the channel and see if somebody asks if this is being recorded. All right, now that we're already set up, everything is set on the background, let's begin. Tomasz, explain Svelte to us and show the use of your Svelte plugin.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So we're gonna open WebStorm in a bit and see what the plugin can do. But let's start with the Svelte website. If you don't know what Svelte is, well, the three key major selling points are displayed on these three boxes. So it's writeless code, no virtual DOM, and truly reactive. And I hope to explain those things during the webinar and show you that it is actually the case. So as I mentioned already some time before, Svelte is a compiler. It's a new approach, different from older frameworks, which use some kind of runtime diffing to find the changes that are happening in your app. And despite that those algorithms are quite sophisticated and there are optimization built in, there still are some escape hatches if you decide that your app is actually too slow. So, for example, in React, there's a component memorization. In Angular, you can detach the parts of your tree from change detection algorithm. And yeah, that's another thing that you need to look out for as a framework user, right? Svelte goes a little one step further, and actually introduces a compile step that figures out which data is connected to which, and how does those relationships look like. So after this compilation step, each event handler actually knows which parts of the document need to be updated to accurately reflect the latest state of the app. And so because of that, you don't need to optimize this change detection, because browser is always doing as little work as possible, as required. And this has a number of benefits. Well, first of all, your app uses less CPU cycles, which is good if you don't have a powerful machine. Users probably use phones to access your site, right? Second, there's no framework bundle. Everything is compiled away if you don't use it. So again, less download sizes for your app. And also, when there are lazy loaded components, you don't need to wait for the whole framework to load. And because of the Svelte is a compiler, it actually introduces some nice concepts, some additions to JavaScript syntax. Because to be honest, JS isn't really made for creating applications. So we have those things like proxies in some frameworks, set state function. Svelte gets rid of that. And the syntax is really, really concise. And another thing is that Svelte doesn't own the document. You can create small widgets with Svelte and embed that in your apps. No matter if it's a single page application that is created in another framework, because maybe you are doing migration, or it can be classic backend server rendered application. For example, some e-commerce, and you only want to include the for example, basket that is more interactive than the rest of the page. You can do it in Svelte. Okay, so now let's quickly jump to Marketplace, and we'll be using this plugin. It's unbundled, so you need to install that. We'll talk about installation a second later, but I wanted to highlight, as Paul said already, it's not only working in WebStorm, but actually in each JetBrains IDE that is capable of running JavaScript, or supporting JavaScript, it's better to say. You can also look at the features and the changelog to see what is being added to the plugin. But for now, let's go back to the Svelte site, and we can see here is a snippet how to launch projects. So I'm going to copy that and go to terminal. Wait a second. Okay. And I'm gonna create a project. So you may not know what those two commands are. npx is basically a way to run anything that is on npm and is a command line tool without installing it. You may know some instances of tutorials that tell you to install a tool globally. Well, you can ignore that and just prepend everything with npx when you are trying to use that command. And degit is a small wrapper that Svelte uses to clone Git repositories and create your fresh project so for you to work with. And that's gonna change in Svelte Git, but if that changes, we're gonna support this in WebStorm. But for now, let's jump to welcome screen, and I'm gonna open this directory that I created from terminal. And yeah, let's give it a second to load. The first thing I need to do is click and then install to load my dependencies. And another thing is, as I said before, I need to install the plugin. So because the Svelte is a file extension, the installation of plugin is, I think, the easiest of all plugins possible. You just need to, when you open the file, you get this banner that is there is a plugin for that. When I click install, it finds only this one. I can click OK, and it will load, yeah, without restarting the IDE, and we are good to go. So now I'm gonna go back to README and see that there is this script that I need to run to get the dev server up and running. So I can use run anything to locate this npm script. It will show in the tool window, and after a second it should be ready. Now I can click on this link to localhost with Command and Shift, and it's another cool feature of WebStorm because it actually opens a debugger connection. So I'm connected to the app and can verify that it is refreshing when I made some changes. Okay, so I'm gonna hide those two windows because they are not really that useful for now. And I'm gonna delete everything that is here. Okay, and let's start with a simple example. And so I'm gonna create a script tag. In Svelte, you can Svelte component is simplified applications that has 3 parts: script for logic, styles for styles, and markup. And you can also add 1 or more elements to display them. So I'm gonna create a count variable, initialize it to 0, and let me create some element. Maybe add a count prefix, and with curly braces, I can add any expression that is available in scope. When I refresh, it should show count. Right? I'm gonna increase my font size. And what is really interesting for me, at least, is that the syntax is really concise, right? You have basically one line that is interesting. It's used to initialize your variable, and then you can just use it, right? Everything that is here in the script tag scope is accessible to your template. Now, let me show you one more interesting thing that is actually like a killer feature for me, because well, this is just a simple, static value, but I'm gonna create a button, maybe the plus, or display the plus value, and then without explaining in depth those prefixes that are called directives, I'm gonna create an event handler. Click event handler in this case, and now I can pass a function here, and I can, in this event handler, just change that simple variable in any way I want. It can be a incrementation syntax, it can be a shorthand assignment, and if I did everything properly, it should be a working counter. Now, how does it even work? It isn't a JavaScript, right? There are no proxies here involved. There is no set state function, but it somehow updates. And the answer to that is Svelte converts this code in the background and figures out that this expression here is dependent on this variable here, on can variable. So when the count variable is changed by anything, this part of the file will be re-rendered. Well, not file, but document. And I think that's really neat and innovative.
Hey, Tomasz, can I make a point on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's coming back to someone that had made a point earlier, and this is the moment to talk about it. What's different is if this was React, what you just said would have to run through a React runtime that was shipped to the browser. What Svelte does is there is no Svelte runtime. It just it generates the JavaScript and it puts a $$ invalidate or something just after the change, right?
Yes, exactly. So this event handler is converted to a code that actually knows what needs to be changed. I'm simplifying a bit, but there's no change detection, as you said, running in the browser, but it's already compiled, and you can actually inspect this code. Maybe I'm not gonna show it right now, but it's everything. Everything is plain, and we don't need to know the Svelte internals, the algorithm, because there's nothing like that. And yeah.
So thanks. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a good point to actually pass the mic back to you and
okay,
for a quick intermission.
Okay, great. So you want to take some questions now and handle our first topic? Is that okay?
Yeah, if there are some questions, I'm cool with answering that.
All right, so we'll switch to our kind of first intermission. And we do have a couple of questions from the audience. One of them, I think you probably could predict. We're going to save TypeScript for later. Another one you probably could predict as well, Dino.
Dino, what about that?
This is probably for both of you. I'll start with you, Andre. Talk about WebStorm itself and Dino. And then Tomasz, if you could talk about Svelte and Dino, not necessarily your plugin. Andre, you first.
Yes, actually WebStorm has the Dino support. It was added, I believe, half years ago. Not right after the release, but after a couple months. And so as far as I know, it works, and everything is okay with the plugin. But I'm not sure about the integration around the Dino and Svelte.
So over to you, Tomasz, for that one. Can you talk about?
Yeah, actually, I have no idea if Svelte is compatible with Dino, because the compiler is a Node app.
Yeah.
Well, it maybe doesn't has any dependencies on Node modules, built-in ones. I haven't tested that, so but there isn't anything specific other than Svelte is actually integrates with different tools like Rollup and Snowpack, Webpack, things like that, and those are Node applications.
Yeah.
So if you would like to use Dino with Svelte, you would need to port those things before porting Svelte to
Right.
that.
What I saw is there's no official support. I think I saw a couple of repos that forked Svelte as an experiment. But as you mentioned, Rich Harris, the creator of Svelte, is also the creator of Rollup. And certainly the direction that Rich is going with the future of Svelte and bundlerless and Snowpack and all those other things probably means it might be a while. So on to a couple of other questions. 2 questions about the plugin in either Sapper or Svelte Kit. This is going to be an easy answer. Tomasz, take it.
Yeah, so the Sapper and Svelte Kit. Svelte Kit is like a how do I explain that? Of course, we are looking into that, and we would like to support it as soon as possible. And Svelte Kit is basically a base Svelte plus routing, and plus some kind of different configuration options.
And some SSR.
So, yes. But from the point of plugin, you don't actually need to, I think, worry about SSR. It's happening behind the scenes, and so for now it's not for now there isn't any code that is actually supporting Svelte Kit, but it should be
right.
straightforward to add some of the new things that Svelte Kit is introducing. There will be probably some attributes around routine and things like that.
Now's not really the time to look at Svelte Kit. It's still in the oven baking. Easy question for you, Tomasz, and on the way to an impossible question, and then we'll stop and switch over to the intermission topic. Easy question. Somebody said, hey, can you show debugging Svelte with WebStorm right at the moment that you showed it? Leading to the next question of, wait, no setup was needed?
Yes.
So and actually, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay. That's one of the newest additions. And actually, Andrei contributed that. I'm going to show Getter icons because they are not visible right now. And okay, so I'm going to expand this arrow function using, WebStorm intention, so it looks better.
Have a place to put a breakpoint.
And I'm going to add a breakpoint. Well, we'll see if it works. It should. Yeah, and it's broke here. And yeah, you have access to the scope, all your scopes, things like that. There's a console here, so you can interact with your app. I'm gonna show you some interesting bits about that later, when there is more code in the application. But basically, the debugger works. It is configured automatically. I'm gonna show it once more again. When you have any application really, and you encounter a link to the browser in build output, you can click it with Command and Shift keys, and it will go, well, not go, but it will create a debug configuration for you and launch it in a separate window.
That's a JavaScript debug run configuration, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, I would just like to point out, I can't move my laptop before disconnecting from the webinar, but you can just jump right into a debug session and everything works perfectly. So you're better at this than I am. On to the impossible one. Can you use something else? This is a Svelte question mostly. Can you use something else other than curly braces in the templating? Suppose that you're combining this with a backend framework that also uses curly braces.
Not in a plugin, and not officially. I don't know if anybody is doing that, but I'd encourage you to change your templating engine to use something different than current places and use.
What's your backend? That's your answer, is to change the backend, right?
Yeah. Yes, but well, the way I see it, you shouldn't really, add so many templating things to the Svelte files. Just leave them as be. Of course, we support templating engines, so you can add, for example, PHP extension to after the Svelte one, and it will be both PHP file and a Svelte file. But it's not that popular, I think, because if you want to do like the blessed way of backend applications in Svelte, you actually you should use Supper or Svelte Kit and provide your data, for example, JSON or things like that. And
let's go ahead and move off of this one. Audience, if you want to know more about this, contact us and we can follow up with you. Andre, on to the topic. Let's spend a couple of minutes on this. You have the topic for the first intermission. What is it?
Yes, it's about technical. I'd say that it's some kind of technical news for the upcoming release 21.1. Usually I do the same thing on my Twitter, but let's try the new format here. First of all, I want to mention our work on web framework support. We've extracted some part of Angular and Vue support into a new API that covers all basic needs of any kind of HTML-based framework. It includes Angular, Vue, Svelte, React, and so on. The reason is very simple, because to build a new plugin for Svelte, for example, is a really tough task right now. But we want to improve our API to make it much more easier. And yes, the work still is in a progress, and as the next step, we plan to add web type support as a part of the new API. We had a blog post in WebStorm blog about web types, but I want to say a couple words about it. It's a format that we use for describing symbols in HTML templates, like components, directive, custom attributes, and so on. Actually, it's very close to the TypeScript typings. Like, we use it to describe some components or directives. Right now, it's a exclusive feature for Vue. Some Vue libraries have it out of the box. For some of them, we pre-generate such typings, and WebStorm can download them automatically based on the packages on info and so on. But the idea of the project is just to make building such plugins as Svelte as simple as possible. And we believe that the new API and web types can help here.
And it's not just building them as simple as possible and getting them working, it's keeping them working as those targets change over time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's been a little bit of madness. My experience with React and TypeScript was always, just because I learned something today doesn't mean it'll still be true in 9 months. And so I really pitied the people who had to write all these integrations. So anything to offload that to something generated would be pretty valuable.
Yes, and also there is one more thing. Like if you created an awesome framework and you want to build a plugin for WebStorm, we can just help it with web types. You can just write a JSON file, and after that, it just will work.
If you want to write a WebStorm plugin, contact Andre directly. He'll send you 10 T-shirts, 100 stickers, and
yeah, right.
We do have some good plugins, and sometimes we even hire the people, right?
Right.
All right, so we'll switch back to you in just a second, just to wrap this segment up. I believe you, Andre, did you do a blog post or a series of tweets on the web types thing? You did a blog post on it, right?
Piotr Tomek did the blog post.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So for people that are interested in some more information on this, they can go to our blog and find the answer to this and many other questions, right?
Yeah.
All right. Anything you want to add on that before we close out this segment?
I don't think so. We can continue the presentation.
Let's go ahead and switch back over to Tomasz's screen. We're getting into the stuff where he's going to blow your mind.
Yeah. And well, no end, but I'm gonna select everything, and actually for now let's cut it if my keyboard allows me, because my X key stopped working. It's breaking from sometimes. And let's create another component. So there is a dedicated entry in new context menu here. And when I click it, I can, give it a name, but actually many people don't know you can actually create folders with it. For some reason, maybe deep in this example is not a good idea, but you get the gist. And it created it here. And when I refresh the app, it disappeared because there is it's not used anywhere. But I can easily include it in my app. When I open the angle bracket, we have suggestions for every component in a project. When I press enter, it will auto import the reference from that file, and give it a refresh, and we still have our counter, but it's now encapsulated. So I'm gonna create some footer here just to show you something later. Well, I can add styles to this component with style tag. And Svelte styles are actually scoped. So when I color this paragraph, it will colorize only this paragraph, and the other one is stays the way it was before. I can actually, just to prove that it works both ways, I can, add another styles here and show you that the count paragraph is not affected. And this is maybe not maybe not mind-blowing just yet, but it's actually nice that the framework provides you out of the box with everything that you need to create an encapsulated component, right? Okay. Another thing the Svelte is well, not Svelte, but every framework has is passing data from parent to children component. And in Svelte, you accomplish that with prepending the export keywords to the script. Because this file is not really a JavaScript file, Svelte is like repurposing the export keyword to denote props. It might look weird for a second in the beginning, but it's actually really neat when you are working on Svelte for a bit of time. And I can go back to application, and the IDE is suggesting me that there's prop with this name. And I can, for example, put 5 here, and it will, start the counter on 5, and I can increase it later inside of the component. Cool. Now, I only showed you like the simple relationship between the data. I have one variable, and I change it, right? But when there are many examples when you have some derived data that depends on other things. So in Svelte, you can create reactive declarations by using this dollar label syntax. Let's name it double count. And I'm gonna put an expression here that it will always hold true whenever I change anything in the app. So, the event handler stayed the same, and I can, replace this this expression, and as you can see, it updates automatically. And another thing you can do is reactive statements. Let me just also show you that this is a normal variable. You can, for example, click on that and see that it's used in line number 9 on your application, right? So you can navigate to that back and forth, just as you can do it with normal variables. I noticed I didn't exclude the build for the directory, so I'm gonna do this right now, so my code inspections are cleaner. And yeah, this thing isn't the reactive statements aren't limited to one thing. You can create as many relationships as possible as you want, and it will behave as you expect, without surprises. Cool. You can also create statements that are run whenever the things that you reference inside the variable changes. So, for example, you can create something like this, and I could change a variable. And then I'm gonna use this variable to append a class conditionally to a element. And first of all, I want to show you that you are getting the IDE's IntelliSense for this, but you also can use a class directive, and it suggests you both class CSS class and is high variable. And the reason is that well, you can put the class here and put the trophy value inside the expression. And when you increase the count, it will the reactive statement will run and change this value here. Okay. Now let's talk about another thing that is quite common in applications. Probably there's no application without forms, right? And in some frameworks, there's a lot of things you need to keep in mind when you want to wire up your form controls, and because of that, there are many libraries that help you with that. In Svelte, this is quite simple. I forgot how to create input in HTML. Okay, it's this. So I have a input here, and I want to, of course, create some variable that will be displayed, in this input. Oh, not in this input, but it will be bound to this input, and then it will be displayed below that. And this. So to do that, you are using the bind directive, which works on properties of elements, and there are also some things that there are also some improvements for things like file input, which is hard to operate in plain HTML, plain JavaScript, but in Svelte there are some shortcuts. Anyway, if I write something here, it applies the styles because I use the P. Yeah, if I write something here, it will be reflected in both places. And now the fun part. What if I want to extract this component and create something more sophisticated with some validation and labels? Let's name it fancy input, and create a script for that. And we are lacking this value variable, so let's create that. Actually, it will be a prop. And now, if I use this fancy input here, and add a bind directive. Remember, this is not an element. This is a Svelte component. It will also work. Of course, this name is it could be different. And I'm getting suggestions, things like that. One thing I didn't cover yet is what if you want to display something conditionally. There are various ways to, there are blocks for that, and there are various ways you can use the IDE to add them. The simplest way is creating an expression and then creating a prefix. And I'm gonna add another prop and name it label. And if label is truthy, let's display this label. And when I go to the app, I can also pass this as a prop. And it appears here. As I said before, there are some other ways to create.
Hey, before you switch off of the if I can, I'll bring in, because there's a question that's related to this. And before you get rid of it, I don't want it to go off the screen. There's a question about does Svelte serve? This is a Svelte question. Does it serve priority-based content in the UI, like concurrent requests while it's loading something? And if I remember correctly, I believe it's the if can be pointed at a promise or an async result and only show and actually branch to show something while it's waiting, when it succeeds, and if it fails. Is that right?
Yeah.
You don't have to go into it, you can just explain it.
Yeah, it's, I can do that real quick. So there's a await block, and let's do it like that.
Okay, I'll let you start typing, and I'll do a little bit more background on it. So get this prepped in the typing. The reason this is this is really cool in a number of reasons, but one of the reasons this is really cool is it comes back to this is a compiler, not a runtime. So what Svelte is doing is it's baking into the generated JavaScript instead of pointing at the runtime, and the runtime will let you know. It knows what you're pointed at, so it generates the JavaScript that's looking at that specific promise. And then it hides it behind a syntax in the templating system so that you don't have to really know what it's generating in the back end. So did I kill enough time?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I've done a small promise, and let me first of all show you one thing I wanted to mention. For example, you may want to surround some big structure of elements. It can be deeply nested divs, right? And you want to wrap everything here in a block, in a Svelte block. So you can actually invoke the surround with emmet action, and here you can use Svelte blocks like if or await. You can actually you can also use nested structures, and I think not many people know about that. And this is like I should make it clearer in the description that it works that way. But anyway, you can do stuff like that, and it will wrap it with whatever you pasted into that field, and then I can use add this promise to the await block, add the then clause, and let's name it somehow, because there's a expression here, and now I should be able to display that. Yeah, as I can see, after 1 second, it replaces itself with result of the promise. Okay. So
is it okay if we go ahead to the next intermission? We're getting close to 45 minutes. Is there more that you wanted to show before we went to the next intermission?
That's actually a great call. So let's do that. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to the intermission, take a couple more questions. I'll keep these a little bit short, and then we'll keep the open discussion part kind of short as well. First one is purely about Svelte. Is it possible to take the generated Svelte JavaScript and embed them in another website without any dependency other than the JavaScript file? Kind of a web components kind of question.
Well, web components are a different story, and
A
actually,
different kind of
Svelte
thing. It's in the same genre, though.
yeah.
Framework-less stuff.
So I think it's best to show my screen again, please. I'm gonna go to the main file here. I think it's not still in place. Basically, if a component, thank you. The thing that that is compiled out of the Svelte file is a class, JavaScript class, and you can initialize it however you want. So, for example, you have some element from taken from deeply nested React structure and hierarchy, and you get a reference to the element. You can pass this element as a target property of a Svelte component, and it will mount itself to that element, and this is a standalone thing that can be added to different parts of your application, and you can actually later in your app, for example, as an event handler in React, you can. I think that set method, you can use the set method and pass new props here. For example, there's a name prop, so I can pass a universe here. And right now, if I refresh, nothing will happen because this prop is not used. But actually, you can refresh not refresh, but you can pass new data to Svelte component from rest of your application.
So we'll step back from the can you to the should you. Is this a pattern that anybody in Svelte does that you know of, or is this really you're on your own?
Well, it's possible when you want to. The best way, the normal way to do that, it would be to generate wrappers, for example, React. So you don't code this manually, but when you want to integrate things with Svelte. And actually, there's, for example, a story of Video.js that.
Perfect.
Well, this is a media player, and they had their own rendering engine because they wanted to show controls, the seeker, things like that. And there were bugs in that, so they rewrote it to Svelte. Last time I heard, and they have. I think there are many integrations with Video.js, so you don't care that there is Svelte under the hood. You use it as any different component from your application, and it's doing its thing on the compile step, and so that when you pass new values, everything updates and stay updated.
It's interesting you bring up Video.js because I use it for the WebStorm guide, which is in Gatsby, which is an example of 200 or 300 hours of pain, not knowing the difference between it's possible versus you should. So that was why I was asking that question. Last question, and then we'll do open discussion. Are people using Svelte for backend and databases stuff? I know this is kind of a Sapper and Svelte kit kind of question, so feel free to say it's related to that.
Backend in databases. I'm not really sure how to answer that, but Sapper and SvelteKit is more of a application that you are getting, some data source. It can be a JSON, basically, endpoint.
Yeah.
And you display that data on the server, but it's JavaScript application. You probably can embed, there was actually the question about templates, PHP, Python, things like that. I think you could go this route and bake the values returned from database into components that are then passed to the client, something like that.
I'll answer one question. There's a question about what testing framework to use. You and I talked about it. We're not going to talk about it in this webinar, maybe a future webinar, but people use Jest and they use testing library because it has a good integration with Svelte, right?
Yes.
Yep. Right. Cool. Good. Okay. On to the topic. And we can go for hours on this. That's not a threat. We will keep it close. I have a topic about symbols. And when I see what's on the screen with the Svelte integration, I think about IDEs and symbols. So much power happening on the screen. When you see the autocomplete, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. There's refactorings, there's navigation, there's all these other kinds of things, quick fixes and stuff. And so what Tomasz has done is he's taken these kind of peculiar things in Svelte, the templating language, the expression language, the weird on binding for events, the bind, the await, whatever, the policy that anything exported as a prop, the policy that if you use a let and declare a variable, it's available in the template, and turn them into symbols. And I bring that up because a lot of times people still think of strings, they still think of files, they navigate by file name. Throw all that out the door. Close your file tool. Just navigate by symbol. Just name your files XYZ so that you won't be tempted to look at the file name. So I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion, Andre, with you as you look across all the frameworks we're discussing and the value of symbols.
From my point of view, symbols mostly like a generic name for any kind of entities that have has your code. For example, it's functions, variables, attributes, anything. And when we talk about symbols, usually we mean that IDE can understand this part of the code and suggest in some context. Yeah.
And give you a red squiggly if you make a mistake. You know.
Yeah. It actually it depends on the support, but in general, it just provides a good search for such thing. And
well said. Good point.
Use this search, you can say that the entity exists or not exists. You can navigate to the symbol or something like that. Yeah.
And what we're seeing is Tomasz is wiring bit by bit more of the Svelte support up to all of that infrastructure. So he doesn't have like refactor, rename, or extract a component at the moment, but all that's sitting there in the platform, right?
Yeah. It uses all the platform features, and I believe Tomasz didn't try in the presentation, but I believe all the refactorings work if the reference are implemented correctly there. For example, you can rename the file. I'm not sure about file but I'm sure that renaming the variable will rename the usages in the template and so on.
That's right.
I love that stuff. Sorry, go ahead. Tomasz, did you want to comment on that?
Sorry. Yeah, so everything inside the one file should work flawlessly. So, for example, if you want to rename some variable that is used in the template, you can do that, and it will, update the thing that is placed inside the script. You can actually also rename your components, but well, it will still work. But the imported name will stay the same for now. So you may want to go through all your imports and correct that, or maybe you don't want to do that. Yeah, but there are definitely things that can be improved here, and we'll be working on getting this support to up to 100%.
Okay, let's switch back over to the screen for Tomasz. We're running a little low on time, so I think in segment number 3, you can only pick one thing to show, and the other things that you and I discussed, you might have to just talk about them.
Yeah, okay. And the cool thing is I actually already covered the debugger in some part. I wanted to talk about it in this segment. So shout out to the audience for being on topic. And I think the last missing piece is that Svelte has to offer that I didn't show is our stores. Basically, stores are really simple objects that you can use, throughout your application to provide global state, and you can also take some other things like, for example, I don't know, WebSocket connection library, wrap it in Svelte store and use it in your templates really easy. And the basic idea is that you have a store that is, for example, let's name it numbers, and I'm gonna create that. It's readable. You need to import that from Svelte stores package, and I'm gonna initialize to number 5, and the way you use it is let's replace this text, and if I add the numbers to the expression, well, it will output gibberish, right? You would need to somehow subscribe to get this value, right? But Svelte has a syntax for that. You just prepend the store with a $sign, and you have a 5 here. So maybe this is not really impressive, but keep in mind that you can add that, import that in many places of your application, and it will update accordingly. Now, let me try if this works. Maybe you shouldn't do that, but whatever. Numbers. Oh no, you can't use window in Svelte. But if I create a file, move that here. Take a look that the import statement was imported automatically. That's really neat. And I'm gonna export that. And numbers should be imported now. And okay. So we have 5 here. Let me go to the debugger console numbers, and I can actually, pass anything here, and whoop, it is updating. So imagine this is another event handler or another framework. You can control Svelte in that way, and it data flows properly from those stores. So you could, for example, create a reactive statement, name it something, subscribe to the numbers here, and double that. And I believe it will work if I press something here. Yeah, and now when I set that, both of the variables are updated. Yeah. There are also things on Svelte that, well, let me rephrase that. There are also animations included in Svelte. This is really neat. Works in a similar way to bind directives and on directives. You add a transition and import that from the package, and now it won't work just yet. But if I wrap this into if, and subscribe to number, for example, here, and add a conditional check, I can yet again set these numbers to 10, and it will appear with an animation, and also should disappear. Boom. Yeah, so I think that would be all from the things I wanted to highlight, since we are also running a bit of the time. And I think it's best to now answer some more questions people might have.
Really, there's just one. It's not so much a question, it's just to explain a little bit more about what we hope to accomplish in this webinar. We weren't going to really tackle too much why you should use WebStorm for Svelte. Mostly it was explain Svelte because it is a really different approach. We're going to explain it to our WebStorm users and then show what we can do. We hope to have a webinar in the future where we show more about the plugin. As a brief example, though, WebStorm as an IDE just brings a whole bunch to the table for JavaScript development and web development. And as we hook this up for Svelte, you'll see things like everything works everywhere. If you're in the middle of doing a commit and you bring up the diff and you've got the code on the right, you can actually do optimize imports in the middle of your diff editor or autocomplete or things like that, because it's the IDE and we wrote everything. So everything works everywhere. So we'll talk a little bit more in the future about why WebStorm. This webinar was really why Svelte. And that webinar will be 5 hours long. Sorry, just kidding. Before we head to the conclusion, Andre, do you have anything?
Yes, I wanted to add that actually from the IDE developer point of view, Svelte is an awesome language because actually Svelte is a compiler and it's something that IDE can do. If we compare it with other web frameworks, they can be much harder to from the IDE developers because you need to understand the context. You need to, in some cases, you need to just run the code and something like that. But in case of Svelte, yeah, it's magic. In case of Svelte, you just need to analyze this code, and after that, you can do anything that Svelte can do.
I mean, it's almost by definition, since Svelte is a compiler, the things it does have to be available to static analysis in some way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely. It does the same job.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So that means that we've got a bright future for Svelte and WebStorm. Tomasz, anything you'd like to add before we go to the conclusion? You never explained TypeScript. You said you were going to say something about TypeScript.
Yes. So there are two parts of the TypeScript question, let's say. First of all, you can actually add just lang ts here, and it won't compile right now because I don't have okay, sorry. You can add that lang ts here, and the framework will work. Well, WebStorm will work and will understand the types. Only the I don't have a bundler set up to understand that. But I can, for example, I don't know, as a string here. There are no squigglies. Just works. You can navigate to definition of interface, things like that. Another question, or like the thing that is expected to work, is the type checking of props here, right? Right now it doesn't. There's no error here, and this is one of the top things we would like to address in this plugin. It's a little bit more complicated than including the language server protocol inside the WebStorm, because WebStorm has those various subsystems that needs to be integrated with that. But definitely we would like to do that sooner than later. And I hope to have some good news about that in the near, well, maybe not near, but the foreseeable future.
See, that's the problem. You just went like an hour and 5 minutes without making any mistakes, even when you had to improvise, which means I'm going to bring you back for more webinars. Now that I know you're perfect at this. All right, well, let's go ahead and switch to my screen and get us out of here. All right. Thanks, Tomasz. Really, you did a great job on this, on really explaining to us why Svelte matters, what should people think about it, how the plugin fits into all of it. If any of you have any more questions later, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We can reach the WebStorm team by email, by social media, lots of different ways. We can follow up to some of the questions that we might not have gotten to. If you want to get more information about WebStorm, go to our website at jetbrains.com/webstorm. We'd love your feedback on this webinar. So please feel free to contact us on Twitter or in the after webinar survey. Fill in the survey. We read it and we make changes based on it. The recording will be available on YouTube soon. We'll also announce that. Also, check out our blog at blog.jetbrains.com/webstorm, where you can find up-to-date news about releases and events. Obviously, a lot of stuff going to be going on this month. So if you want to keep in touch, look at the blog. You can also find educational resources there. And for example, the announcement about the recording of this will be there in a few days. And we'll also provide some additional links and information in the presentation in our blog post. That's all from us today. A wonderful and fun tour through everything. Thanks, Tomasz. Thanks, Andre. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and hope you have a nice day.
Thank you, Paul.